Let's continue the conversation about universities and historical debt. Bring in University South Africa CEO, Professor Ahmed Bawa, who's joining us to talk more about the state of readiness for 2021. Prof, always good to speak to you. So I was looking at something, a communique from WITS today that said of the student population of some 37,500, about 27,000 of those students are on some sort of financial assistance, be it a bursary, a loan, or a scholarship. That does not sound like a very sustainable scenario, doesn't it, in the long term?
First of all, thank you, Tebekile, for having me on the program again. And I think that we have to just remind ourselves that the universities are not all uniform, right? I mean, so the situation that you speak about at WITS and that little clip before we came on, that captures the situation at WITS may not be the same situation across the whole country. The figure of 27,000 partly will include students who qualify for NSFAS assistance, but will also include students who receive kind of bursaries, loans, and so on from other kind of parties. So there'll be a significant number of students who receive bursaries from engineering companies or even not-for-profit organizations, who make available resources. And of course, the universities themselves have bursaries. A significant amount of money goes into bursaries every year. So it will be a combination of all of those that makes up this number at WITS at least. But each university has its own mix, if you like. Yeah.
The issue, though, Prof, at the moment, the crisis, the recurring crisis, is always about historical debt, where the SRC and universities clash about whether to write it off in full, whether to seek funding from elsewhere to cover those balances. At WITS, you're hearing talk about the creation of what they're calling a hardship fund. Can they all, precisely because you've highlighted these differences, can all universities in this country afford to create such a fund?
Yeah, no, that's exactly correct. It's just a few universities that will be able to generate the kind of resources that is required. So let me just make a couple of points about this. Right? First of all, the debt that is owed to universities at the moment, tuition fee debt, is in the region of 10 billion rand. I mean, so at WITS, I'm aware, at WITS actually the amount is about, at the moment, the amount is about 250 million rand. So, the idea that that amount can be simply written off is just not on the cards, simply because it will make a huge dent, to the ability of these universities to continue to be sustainable and so on. So our second point to make is that none of this debt is really attributable to students who qualify for the NSFAS funding. So because the new bursary system at least completely covers the cost of studies and the cost of accommodation and so on. So this is mainly now debt that has accrued to students who fall into this category that we refer to as the missing middle. It's an odd term, but it's a term that we use. And the fact of the matter is that we really don't have a national system yet to cater for the needs of students in that category. And this is a major gap in the system. And we've engaged with government and with the banks and so on to try and understand how we can address this issue in a systemic fashion so that these students don't have to, at the beginning of every year, rush around to look for resources to pay them off.
And why is it taking so long, Prof? Forgive me for jumping in again. Why is it taking so long to come up with a solution, a remedy for the missing middle? Because, as you and I were both saying, this happens every year.
Yes. Yeah, and by the way, at the historically disadvantaged institutions and universities of technology, this has been going on for 12 years or 15 years, every year, at the beginning of every year. So it's certainly not a new challenge. So, of course, the response from the government is that there's just not enough money in the fiscus to cover any new kind of system. What you hear from the banks is that if they were to make low-interest loans to students, that would require guarantees of some kind from government and government, of course, is not prepared to do that. So, so there's a conundrum here, and the bottom line is that, we are caught in this very difficult situation where these students just simply do not have access to the resources that they require to study.
And the other big numbers crisis is that of space versus the number of applications received. We're using VITS tonight as our case study because they're saying that they received about 70,000 applications for 2021. They only have space for an intake of 5,000 first-year students. So is the creation of more seats, more lecture halls, moving at a fast enough pace to meet the level of demand?
Yeah. So we have to be a bit careful about those numbers, right? Because every university will tell you. I mean, I was the Vice Chancellor at Durban University of Technology, and we've taken 100,000 applications every year for 7,000 places. You have to be slightly careful with those numbers because each one of those applicants has applied to 5 or 6 universities, and each of those applicants has applied to 5 or 6 different programs at each university. So we have to be slightly careful with those numbers. And what I can tell you is that this year, I think we had about 220,000 students who, I can't remember the exact figure, I think it was about 210,000 students who matriculated with a bachelor's pass. And the universities have an intake capacity of about 220 or 230,000. So it's not the huge crunch that it appears to be when you hear those numbers from each individual university, if you like.
So there's often, as you're saying, a duplication perhaps of a single application across multiple institutions. All right, Professor Ahmed Bauer, CEO of University South Africa, always good to speak to you. Thank you.